Let's do it. Perfect. Okay. Home buying 101. So thank you for taking your time out of your day to watch this and participate. The market is ever changing. It's changed so much year over year over the past few years. And it's really exciting to educate and empower buyers to know the process, know what to expect, and really essentially at the end of the day, decide what's the best decision for them on whether or not to move or what they need to do to get ready to move. And that's why we are here today to help you. So we are going to go through the process from start to finish. Hopefully you can see my screen okay. But there are 5 different steps of the Home Buying 101 process. So number 1, we are going to talk about agency and how that works. There's actually 4 different ways that agency can play a factor. And with that being said, we will do essentially the most common, kind of the different pros and cons with agency. And then we're going to go over how you essentially come up with your needs versus wants. So with that being said, what do you absolutely have to have? What is a must have? And what would you like to have, but you're willing to kind of live without? And so it's really good to hone in that search and really figure out what those are, because sometimes depending on your budget, there's some wants that you wish you could absolutely have, but depending on that, you may not actually end up getting that. And so it's just good to obviously get clear on what those are, and then as well as selecting and shopping for a home, how you select a home, how we shop for homes, what that process looks like as we get you out to see homes in person. That's actually the most exciting part, I would have to say, especially when you end up finding the one. And then when you do find the one, what the negotiation process looks like. So how we negotiate, and there's actually 3 different opportunities to negotiate a contract. Most people aren't familiar with that. They think it's just right up front, which is one of the 3 times, but we will get into that a little bit later. And then once you do go under contract, what that coordination process looks like from under contract to close. And at the end of this Home Buying 101 process, we would love to obviously have a mutual agreement with all of you. Essentially, you see the value that we bring to the table, and you trust us to help you make this move a reality. So let's dive into it. Okay, so on the agency options, the first and foremost is where each party is equally represented. It means essentially that's the most common, and to me, the most beneficial for both parties. That means a seller has hired a listing agent to essentially look out for their best interests throughout the process and transaction. So that seller has essentially hired an agent to run a CMA for them, a market analysis, come up with a marketing plan, narrow down what the pricing is right on that home, what fair market value is, and then go ahead and put it out there to buyers, buyer's agent, and the open market in general to try to find the right buyer for that house. And then once they get an offer, right, negotiate the best price and terms possible. And then on the flip side of that, that's where a buyer also has their representation, an agent like us, that is essentially helping them make sure they are getting pre-qualified, their credit's in line, they have down payment money saved, we are searching within their budget. And then once we find the right home, we are also then going to negotiate on their best behalf with the best price and terms possible. That's perfect, because essentially both people have somebody that does this day in and day out, that's trained and certified and experienced, helping them look out for their best interest. Now, sometimes buyers will be driving through a neighborhood and they'll see a sign out front and they'll call that sign. Well, that sign obviously goes to the listing brokerage, whether it's the listing agent or the brokerage, and they may ask some questions. And in that case, they're actually talking to who represents the seller. And so in that case, essentially, you as a buyer could say, hey, seller's agent, I want you to also represent me, which is then the limited agency. And so that is kind of, we use the analogy, that's like an attorney representing both plaintiff and defendant. So it's kind of hard to obviously look out for both people's best interest. And with that, they are supposed to remain neutral. Well, they already have an established relationship with the seller. They've already been helping them probably for weeks, if not months, right? Doing all the preliminary work and guidance, getting them up to having it listed and on the open market. So they already have a pretty good relationship and have already guided them. And then at which point, as soon as they become a limited agent, they're supposed to remain neutral to both people. Well, I really don't understand why you would do that when you have every right to have your own representation. And so sometimes with that, you'll be driving through as a buyer through a neighborhood and you'll see a for sale by owner sign. Well, that's an unrepresented seller. That's where a seller thinks that obviously, they know what they're doing, that they can sell it themselves. They may or may not actually understand the process. They may or may not understand what fair market value is. They may or may not even have contract documents that look out for both people's best interests and as things play out. And so it's great to always have at least one professional involved. And so it's obviously an emotional process, especially for the buyers. It's a financial process for both parties. And so with that being said, okay, great. Unrepresented seller for sell by owner. That's great. But we as a buyer's agent could still obviously see when they bought that home, essentially how much they bought it for, run our own market analysis on it. We can help with the paperwork and the contract documents and all of that sort of stuff. And typically that seller is actually going to be thankful for our help. We've sold actually a lot of first sell by owners to our buyers over the years. And in most cases, they will still cover a buyer's agent to represent the buyer in that situation. So that's when the seller's unrepresented. And then the flip side of that is you could call on that sign, talk to the listing agent and say, oh, but do you know what? I don't want you to represent me. I actually want to represent myself. And that's that screenshot that you have here in bold, in dark writing, all caps. It says, you understand you have every right to have your own representation and you're choosing not to. And just so you know, when it comes to the fees that agents charge, typically a seller ends up paying those in one way, shape, or form through negotiations. Or if they are on the multiple listing service, so utahrealestate.com, they're already offering compensation for a buyer's agent to bring them a buyer and have a successful closing. So with that being said, that's the 4 different ways. And like I said, number 1's my favorite. It's the most common. It's where both parties have equal representation. So that is what we will most likely find ourselves in. And then step number 2 is clearly defining your needs and wants. So us as agents, we like to make sure that we know what you're looking for in a home. People will say, oh, I want a single family home. I want it 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, 2-car garage. Well, that can mean many different things. Is that a single family home? Because technically you can find 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, 2-car garage with a single family home. Or is that essentially a townhome? Do you like having an HOA? Do you like having somebody that does the maintenance and different things for you, but given that you're okay paying that HOA fee in addition to your mortgage, right? And so we're going to ask you about the home's features. We always tease and say, sadly, there's no ugly or cute button. So sometimes they're not what you like, but maybe a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 2-car garage, you have an idea of what that looks like. You're going to say, okay, I want it, essentially I like having an island, or a breakfast bar is okay, or I absolutely need a pantry, or I need, a lot of space in a certain area because I like to host gatherings or people come over all the time. So we're going to try to hone in that search for you as much as possible. But the biggest thing is going to be those home features of what you can't live without. Maybe you want an island, but it only has a breakfast bar and you end up being okay with it because it has everything else that you like. Maybe, for example, you would love a 3-car garage, but a 2-car is essentially what you absolutely have to have. And maybe it has a shed for the extra things that you would have put in your 3-car garage. And then location, right, is another thing that can't be changed. So, sometimes people are saying, oh, I want this city. Well, when I start asking about surrounding cities, they're willing to consider that too. And then I ask about the surrounding cities from those surrounding cities. And we really try to push your location to take a broader, approach with it before we start to really hone it in, because there may be actually opportunities and options out there that may be exactly what you're looking for. And maybe it's 5, 10, 15 minutes further away than you actually ideally want. And so it's really good to know your location. Again, the home feature and layout, because those are the two things you really can't change. And then what's your time frame? Are you under a time crunch, or do you have plenty of time to look? If we're casually looking, that's great. But inevitably, if somebody essentially needs to be out of their home within 60 days, we want to get this process started. We want to get a search set up, start getting out to look at homes, honing in that search, really figuring out your needs and wants that do actually end up typically changing after you see homes in person. You may have said, oh, I absolutely have to have a finished basement. And then you see plenty of homes that have the cutest, finishes inside. It's in the great location. It's actually under budget. And you may say, do you know what? I'm actually willing to finish the basement because there's some better homes and better things that I like that now I'm willing to change my criteria. So we're constantly revisiting that to hone it into what your current needs and wants are after you do a little bit more diligence. And then we always say too, after we obviously are working with you and we're figuring out your needs and wants, then we're going to say essentially step number one before we get super serious is getting pre-qualified by a lender. Now, unless you're paying cash, which again, some people do have cash in today's day and age, which is great, but I would still say about 80% of our buyers right now still are getting a loan of some sort, whether that's FHA, VA for veterans, whether that's conventional financing because they have, plenty of down payment funds. Whatever it is, we're going to work with your lender to figure out what type of loan program is best for you. And that we're also making sure we're shopping in your budget. So you may want that 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 2-car garage home. And I may say, okay, well, how much are you willing to spend? And they may say, I don't know, my budget's, 400, 500, 600, whatever it is. And I say, okay, well, what are you comfortable with spending every month? Because at the end of the day, that's how most people do their monthly payment and their shopping is based on what is my monthly payment going to be? What can I actually afford? What's my cash flow in, my essentially expenses going out? And so we like to make sure that we're not pushing that boundary unless we absolutely have to on what you feel comfortable spending every month. And then we'll have the lender run those numbers backwards. And you may have said essentially like, oh, it's 400,000. And the lender may say, well, actually what your budget is and what you pre-qualify for, you could go up to 450 if you absolutely had to. Like that's still going to be within your monthly budget. And then they're also going to make sure that your credit and your credit report is accurate. So I always tease, John Smith, very common name. Somebody may have attached something or started reporting negatively on a John Smith's credit that's not actually John Smith, the correct John Smith. And so with that, we just like to make sure too, there's ways to actually increase your credit so then you get a better mortgage rate, which obviously impacts that monthly payment greatly. And so it's just good for them to obviously get all of that process started and give us that pre-qualification letter. So then when we go to submit an offer on a home that you fell in love with, we can actually show to the sellers, package that up with your offer and prove to them that you're able to perform on the contract, that you're not essentially putting the cart before the horse. And so we do save that in your file and have it on hand, and we get it updated as needed. And so that way, when we go to make an offer, we have everything that we need, because I swear it's Murphy's Law. It's Friday at like 8 p.m. and we got done showing homes and you want to make an offer. And then it's heading into the weekend and the lender's not working, right? Depending on who your lender is. We don't want to wait on the lender or hold off essentially, or, miss out on the right home for you because we don't have that in your file. And so once we get essentially your needs and wants list and we get you pre-qualified, now we're going to start your home search. So we're going to say, how many minimum bedrooms do you need? I'm just going to use an example. This week, we just did this yesterday, actually. So we have clients that are moving here from out of state. They said they want 4 bedrooms. One of them's for a gym workout area. And so I asked the question, I said, well, how would you feel about 3 bedrooms and maybe an office, or 3 bedrooms and an unfinished basement, or 3 bedrooms and essentially a 3rd-car garage, right? That they didn't say. So essentially somewhere that you could put still your office and sorry, your workout space, but not maybe essentially a bedroom. And they go, yeah, actually, that would be great. So now I know to put in the search 3 bedrooms instead of 4. And then minimum bathrooms, right? Do you have to have at least 2 toilets, or do you have to have 2 areas that essentially you can bathe in? So whether it's a shower or a tub. And so we're going to go ahead and put that in. And then on garage size, is garage at all a must? Is it even essentially like common with that area? If you're on the East Bench in Salt Lake or even Ogden area, garages aren't really that popular. They may say it's even a 1-car garage, but it's really more a shed, right? Or a workshop area. And so we're just going to ask you about that sort of stuff as far as your location, your budget. Oh, you love historic homes, you know, the charm and, you know, character that they have. Okay, well, FYI, just to set realistic expectations, it's going to be really rare for you to find something with a 2-car garage. And so then we ask, is that okay with you? Because at the end of the day, it's your home and what you want. We're just essentially helping keep an eye on the market and looking at all the options that we can send to you. And then style of home. So not only is it single family, or maybe is it a townhome, but maybe with that, maybe you're like, I want a single family, but it has to be a rambler. I want everything on the main level. Or, hey, it has to be all in one level, but I can't have stairs going in and out because we're trying to avoid stairs. Or maybe, for example, you're like, oh, I really love having 2 separate living rooms. And so maybe a multi-level would be great, because you have essentially your living room as you first walk in, and you got another one right there, but it's still kind of together. So we're going to ask you about styles. And, you know, some people are like, oh, I absolutely hate split levels, because right when you open the door, right, somebody can go upstairs, or you got to go downstairs and you just face the stairs. Well, if you're looking for a mid-century modern home, split levels are going to be very common. And they're actually, to me, a rambler. You just enter the home differently, right? So you still have essentially 2 levels. But yes, when you come inside through the garage, typically you got to go up the stairs, or you're coming through the front door, you have to choose up or down. But again, there's a house for everybody. You know, it could be tall, dark, and handsome, but doesn't mean you're going to absolutely fall in love with it. It's an emotional thing, and you're going to obviously walk in the home and you're going to feel that home's energy, and you're going to see the layout and the colors and maybe the views and the neighbors across the street, and right, all of that sort of stuff. And our job as we're doing this is to find you what's possible, but then go out and show you in person them, because they will look completely different a lot of times, either for the better or for the worse. And then, is age important to you? So some people, again, absolutely want new construction, or they want within the last 10 years or 20 years, because they don't want to worry about the systems, or, you know, essentially the plumbing and the electrical and all of that sort of stuff. Or some people are like, do you know what? I love lead windows. I love, you know, hardwood floors, and I love the bungalows with the arched doors that you enter, right? Again, we're trying to figure out what you love and what you're obviously looking for. So it may be an older home, but they've already updated all the plumbing, all the electrical, the roof, the sewer line out front. Or you may say, do you know what? That's my budget. It only allows me to go for older homes. I can't afford new construction. And in which case we can say, okay, so FYI, there's going to be some things that are normal with it, the age of that home. It might have older electrical. It might have older plumbing inside. It may not have had a brand new sewer line put out to the road and have clay piping, right? These are all things, though, that you may be okay with. And knowing while you live there, you may have to do some of these updates yourself. Maybe it's a project, maybe it's fun for you to do that sort of stuff. And then again, just making sure we're looking in the area you want. And then lot size is a big thing too. I'll have people say, oh, these homes are almost identical, but their price per square foot is really off. I could say, okay, well, a few things price per square foot doesn't take into account is the condition, the lot size, how much of that home is actually finished, right? If you're looking at 2 homes that are pretty identical, but one has a finished basement, that price per square foot is going to naturally be higher because more of it's livable space, or the other one may have an unfinished basement. Or say they're both fully finished, but one has just recently been remodeled, or maybe one has a better view or a better location, right? There's tons of things that don't play into factor when you're just only looking at price per square foot. So just make sure you're comparing apples to apples and oranges to oranges. And we're here to help guide you and point these things out along the way. So once we get your home search set up, we actually do send that to your email. We can set it up every day. So we initially do a first search is going to be everything on the market, which sometimes is a little overwhelming, right? And essentially from there, we send you listings as they become available on the market. So brand new. So that would be obviously new listings, or maybe they've had a price reduction that now it hits in your budget and has all the features that you're looking for. And so other ways that you can look for more opportunities that are out there are those for sale by owners. Every once in a while, we'll go on KSL and we'll look at those just to make sure, right, that we're sending you those opportunities. But if you are looking on KSL and maybe it's listed by an agent, typically if it's still available and it actually meets the criteria that you set for us, we would have already sent it to you. But with that being said, if you do see anything on KSL, whether it's for sale by owner or listed by an agent, send us the link and we can look into it and find out, well, why didn't it send to you? Has it already sold? That's one thing that we find a lot on KSL is agents leave their listings on for a really long time trying to get buyer leads. And so they're trying to get those sign calls essentially from their listings. They all say listings make babies, right? And those babies are buyers, because most of the time the buyer doesn't actually end up buying their listing, but now they can convert them and get them as a client to then go sell them on other properties. Well, that's great. Other than now you just essentially had like a bait and switch, right? And so we want to make sure that you're not looking at homes that have already gone under contract or that are already sold months ago. And then again, if they are for sale by owner, we can still run a market analysis, schedule a showing, help with the negotiation paperwork, and that under contract to close. So just send us a copy of those that you find. And again, we'll look into all of that for you. We don't discriminate just because it's not a for sale by owner. And then depending on your budget, depending on your price range, depending on your needs, is new construction obviously an option for you? So when you're looking at new construction, make sure though that if you are going through a model home that you tell them you're represented, because those builders agents are representing the builders. And just beware that the builders do typically have their own contract. So the Utah MLS and UAR, the Utah Association of Realtors, actually has a new construction REPC, real estate purchase contract. But a lot of these big builders actually have their own contract to use. And who do you think wrote those for them? It's going to be their attorneys. Whose best interests are those attorneys looking out for? The builders. Who those agents that are the builder's agent, who are they also looking out for? Their employer, which is the builder. So you're coming in unknowingly, right? And they make really good friends. Like these are what they do all the time. And so they're going to pretend like they have your best interest and like they're going to negotiate and look out for you. But really at the end of the day, their fiduciary duty is to their builder. And so we want to make sure that you know what you're getting in for. I've met with and sold tons of new construction, many different builders, right? And most importantly, like they are really good at what they do and we tend to work well together, but have things come up throughout the process. It's not a matter of if, but more so when things come up, we as your buyer's agents looking out for you, having reviewed the builder specific contract, having had those conversations with you and the builder's agent, we can then step in and help advocate for you, obviously, when things happen. And so with that being said, if it is something that you're willing to look into, timeline is going to be a big thing. So if you're wanting to do a pre-build right now in today's market, they are about 8 months out from the time that you are going under contract to the time and, submit your deposit to the time the home's completed and has a certificate of occupancy. That's about the average. Some of them can be a little shorter. Some of them can be a little longer, depends on how custom you go. And then with that, also a lot of builders, just because of the shift of the market, they've actually started a lot of spec homes. So spec homes essentially are homes that the builders already own the lot. They've already picked out the plan. They already have pricing. They may have picked out the colors of the paint, the carpet, all of that sort of stuff. So they're building a brand new home without a buyer in mind. essentially to shorten that time frame down. So if somebody does want new construction but can't wait 8 months for it to get completed, that's an option for them as well. And we actually have quite a bit of those available, which is really nice because, again, now you have a brand new home, but you didn't have to be along the whole process, and you can already come in and know exactly what it's going to have. And depending on how far out that spec home is to being completed, because most of the time they'll list that within about 90 days of completion, you still may or may not have some choices that you can pick, like when it comes to paint colors or possibly the carpet colors. Like some of the things you still may be able to pick out, which is kind of nice because you have a say. Okay, so, right, we've set up your search. We know what your budget is. We know your absolutely needs and wants. We're starting to get out there and look at homes in person. And the first time out, we like to try to see anywhere from 3 to 5 homes. We can go look at one, but if it's your first time out, one doesn't really do it for you. Just, it's good to compare these homes, especially back to back, and see essentially how they looked online versus in person, how they compared to what your initial needs and wants lists were compared to now after you've seen them. Maybe you're willing to compromise, or maybe something that you didn't think of before, now all of a sudden you thought of it. So again, it's really good that first time out. It's just kind of like a come to Jesus. And so with that being said, the good homes go really fast. So if they're priced well, they're in a great area, they have, essentially high demand for what it is that they're looking for. And so we don't want to wait days or even weeks to go out there and see that. We want to see it right away. And then you have your option of in-person or virtual showing. So we've had a lot of buyers that are maybe out of state that we can do either a Zoom, we can do FaceTime, we can record and upload to YouTube, or essentially sometimes, if there's a couple, one of the people can go and not the other. And so we'll take the one out and record it for the other, whatnot. So we try to accommodate you as much as possible. And people are really surprised. It only takes about 15 minutes to actually walk through a home from start to finish. And so with that being said, we do a lot 30 minutes. That accounts for drive time. And so say if we are going out to look at 5 homes, you can plan on being out for about 2.5 hours. And, sometimes people are coming in from out of town and they want to see 10 to 15 homes. We're going to break those up into 2.5 hour time blocks. So we may go out for the first 5 in the morning, let them decompress, talk about it over lunch, right? Mentally, essentially kind of get the morning off their shoulders, and then head into the afternoon and go look at more homes. So it's really fun. This is actually the exciting part, is when you, go through them. And then especially when you find the one, is what we call it. And so when it does come time to doing an offer, we will go through the real estate purchase contract. It is a legal and binding contract. It is enforceable. And so it looks like it's a boilerplate, but honestly, there's a lot of different ways that you can fill this out to protect the buyer and or make it more incentivizing for the seller. Say, what if there is multiple offers on the property? We're going to guide you through that. Or maybe there's some things in the real estate purchase contract that aren't covered. And so we need to do an addendum, which is essentially adding to or changing what's already on here. And so we will explain all of that when the time comes. We're not going to do it right now, right? And so essentially it's a lot of, if this were to happen, then this happens. And so it's really good because it gives good boundaries and a lane that throughout this process kind of what to anticipate and expect. And some of it is just, it doesn't apply unless something comes up. So we will talk about what your rights and contractual responsibilities are and what the seller's rights and their responsibilities are. But just so you know, in the state of Utah, every home is sold as is. There are no warranties expressed or implied at all. However, this real estate purchase contract actually is more favorable for the buyer throughout the process, because once they sign on the dotted line and everything's funded and recorded at the closing table, they now assume all responsibility of that home. And so let's kind of go into this. So say, for example, you do go under contract. The very first thing is you're going to submit your earnest money. So earnest money is about $1,000 absolutely minimum, okay, up to about 1%. So say, for example, Yesterday we were talking with a client that was, in a higher pricing point, like more the luxury pricing point. And I told them their minimum earnest money that they need to have is 10,000. Now we had another client last week go under contract and they still made a strong offer, but they only included 5,000, but they were in about half of that pricing point as the clients we talked to yesterday. So we're going to kind of guide you on what's pretty typical for earnest money. Now that earnest money must be deposited with a brokerage within 4 days after acceptance. So it is actually cashed. We had a client one time thought that they just gave us a check and we held on to it. That's not what the contract reads. It actually has to sit in a trust account. And so it is protected. It's not in somebody's operating funds or, in their checking account commingled with, any of their other expenses. It's in a holding account essentially. And we do essentially protect that along the way, depending on what conditions and contingencies you as the buyer have in the contract. And so here's what some of those contingencies are, which obviously have deadlines associated with them. So typically week number 1, you turn in your earnest money within 4 days, and the seller also is going to give us their seller's property condition disclosures. That is pretty much the only obligation the seller has throughout the contract, is to be as truthful and honest with you about what they know about the home. So even if it's been repaired, it's still outstanding. It was essentially something that was disclosed to them by the previous sellers that they bought it from. Anything and everything they're aware of about the home, they are supposed to fill out and in writing send to you for review. It doesn't mean you have to agree to them. It doesn't mean you have to validate them, but to us, their only obligation is to let you know about it. You sign that document saying you've gotten a copy of their seller's disclosures. And then week 2 is going to be your due diligence. So that's going to be your home inspection. That's going to be if you want to add on additional things like meth, mold, radon, sewer scope, right? You can look into anything and everything that you want to. With that being said, this is when you are supposed to know whether or not you want to move forward with the purchase. This is kind of your time to make sure it's in the right location. Maybe it has the good school district. There's no geological conditions around it. I've even had people look into sex offenders in that area, right? Anything that's important to you to look through. We have a checklist, but you can go above and beyond that. That's just essentially giving you some guidance on what to look for. If you ever plan to rent it in the future, can you rent it? Does the HOA allow you to rent it? Does the city allow you to rent it? Maybe they have a restriction on you can only do long-term rentals. And so if you're ever planning to do a short-term rental, like an Airbnb or anything like that. And so with that being said, this is for you to essentially get to know the home, the ins and the outs, and make sure that it's in the right condition for you to move forward. And so after you do your inspections, then the lender is essentially getting going even more so. This is like their time to make sure everything's good to go on your loan. That's going to be your financing and appraisal. So guess what? If you're a cash buyer, you're probably not going to have an appraisal done, but that doesn't mean you can't. You can still make it conditional upon it appraising, even if it's not conditioned upon financing. And so typically week 3, right, we kind of do this step by step. Week 1, we're taking care of these things. Okay, got that done. Week 2, bite-sized piece, taking care of this. Week 3, okay, moving on. We're taking care of that. And so this is typically your final deadline, provided you had due diligence as a condition to purchase, you had financing and appraisal condition to purchase. This is your final deadline to cancel the contract with the sellers and get your earnest money back. But again, it's based on whether or not you were able to get the financing or that you were okay with the financing terms. And so right now with interest rates, right, kind of being volatile, like what if when you went under contract, they were 7%? And what if by the time you get to financing, they shot up to 8%? Well, a 1% difference in your mortgage rate could be a couple $100 in your monthly payment. You may not actually qualify for it now. Or say you do qualify, but you're like, that's not feasible with my lifestyle and everything otherwise. And so it's really your opportunity to get through your financing and also obviously also make sure that it appraises for at least the purchase price. Or if it doesn't, are you willing to make up the difference, right? We'll kind of talk about that stuff in a little bit. And then your last and final week, week 4, typically it happens 30 to 35 days out from the time you go under contract. It's going to be your settlement deadline. That's when you sign your documents at your closing table, or at the closing table at the title company. With that being said, you have to have your down payment funds to the title company as well. And then from there, it's going to be your closing deadline. So that's going to be typically that same day or the next day. That's when the lender funds the file to the title company. The title company then pays off any liens or judgments, right, on the property. And that's when the deed gets recorded at the county and the ownership transfers over to the new buyer. So those are kind of the deadlines, and right, what we're going to talk about as we're preparing your offer to present to the seller. Now, the seller then can either review your offer and say, oh my gosh, this is like a perfect offer. We agree to all the terms. We're going to go ahead and accept your offer. Well, now that seller's locked into what they agree to, a seller doesn't have an out along the way. They can't cancel the contract. If they do, there's essentially a default section in the real estate purchase contract we can go over. We're not going to get into the weeds with that. That's a little too much information, but a seller pretty much is locked in. Okay. However, they can sabotage the deal, right, as we try to negotiate those other 2 times throughout. But in which case, whatever was originally agreed to, provided you're still willing to close, they still have to honor that. Say, for example, they don't agree to all the terms that you present to them. So say, for example, they're like, oh, do you know what? We actually need another week to move out. So we need to move the settlement deadline, or we need to move the possession date. So we're going to agree to everything else besides those 1 or 2 things, right? Or essentially, they may not respond to your offer, or they may have multiple offers and just simply reject your offer because they had other ones that were stronger or better. And so those are essentially the 3 options that the sellers has. If they do counter you, you again can either accept their counter offer, or reject their counter offer because maybe you ended up seeing a different home that you like even better. So that's kind of how the initial negotiations play out. So when you do come to an agreement, that's obviously what we're always shooting after. If it's the right home for you, we've ran market value, we've come up with a good offer, we've negotiated with the seller, and everybody's happy, you come to an agreement, and now you're officially under contract. And in other states, they say that's when you go into escrow. Okay. So essentially meaning your earnest money is going into a trust account, into an escrow holding tank. And so the first 3 steps, like I said, is turn in your earnest money to your buyer's agent. Then we, as your buyer's agent, are going to work with your team behind the scenes. That's going to be your mortgage lender. That's going to be the title company that you want to work with. And we're going to send them all the documents so they can get their process going on their end. And then we're going to ask you to go ahead and move forward with scheduling your home inspection. Now, again, we like you to have the seller's condition disclosures first, or at least a day ahead of schedule. So that way, if they did disclose something, you can let the home inspector know, hey, they actually said they repaired the roof last year and they haven't had any issues since. Can you look at the roof just with an extra, keen eye and just make sure that they repaired it correctly? And so that inspector will obviously do that for you. So it's really good to have that ahead of schedule. Now, what to expect from the home inspection, right? The home inspector, their job is to tell you everything that they find about the property. Otherwise, they personally are responsible for not disclosing that to you because that's what you're paying them. However, they can't look behind walls, right? There are certain things that they can and can't do. So they're going to put that caveat in their inspection report of what they weren't able to inspect. But it's not uncommon for them to find 25 to 50 things wrong, especially depending on the condition of the home, the age of the home. They're also going to include on their typical wear and tear, things that are typical with the age of the home that you can essentially anticipate, right? But the things that we're going to focus on when we get that inspection report is we're going to focus on the major safety, the major structural, and the major systems. So essentially, safety would be, does it have a broken window pane? Is there double taps in the electrical panel that could essentially cause a surge in a house fire? Potentially, not to say it's, going to happen, but we're going to look at those sort of things. Structural may be essentially the foundation. How's the foundation quality? Is it, sturdy? Systems would be, how's the furnace? Is it on its last leg? Is it rusty? Water heater, AC unit, those big ticket items, right? We're going to look at those. And so once you do a home inspection, and by the way, let me just back it up a little bit. When you order your home inspection, so you do that yourself, we'll give you some recommendations, but you're essentially able to use whoever you want. And those home inspections can cost anywhere from $350 to, say you're going to do all the add-ons and all the extras, it can get up to $1,000. That's not part of your earnest money, and that's also not part of your down payment funds. So that's completely separate. But and nobody requires you to get a home inspection. We don't require you to. You have every right to if you make that a condition in your contract, but that still doesn't mean you absolutely have to. But we see it silly to buy your biggest investment of your whole life and not do your due diligence and look into it and make sure. And the benefit of getting it is then we have a second chance to negotiate. So if there are some major safety, major structural, major systems related items, we can ask the seller to fix it. We can ask the seller for money for us to fix it. So essentially meaning you as the buyer after closing to fix it, provided it's not going to be required by the lender. We can either decrease the purchase price, or we can essentially say, do you know what? Everything is great with me. I feel good about it. It's all normal wear and tear. It's all things I'm willing to do after closing. It's, not a problem. I'm going to continue buying it as is and continue with the purchase as originally agreed upon up front. Okay. If we are asking the seller to fix it, if we're asking them for money to fix it, or we're decreasing the purchase price, again, we're doing that in an addendum in writing, and the seller can either say, no, I'm not willing to do any of that. You continue buying it as is, or you can cancel the contract if you have the buyer due diligence condition, or they can say, you know what, we're willing to do some of these, but some of the other things we're not. So they're countering back and forth, or they're going to say, do you know what, we feel good about that. That's reasonable. We understand that. If it's important to you, it'll be probably important to another buyer. We're willing to do that. Sometimes they don't even know about these things. And so that is the second chance throughout the contract that you're able to negotiate. And then once we get through the inspections, right, and through the due diligence period, now we're going to get the home appraised. So your lender orders the home appraisal. If you're paying cash, you would order it yourself. But typically the lender orders the home appraisal because it's actually got to be somebody on their panel. And that actually goes through an appraisal management company now. So it's a third party. It's not directly from lender to appraiser. There's an intermediate person like in the middle. And what they're doing is they do it based on rotation. So they're trying to make it as unbiased as possible. And so once the appraiser goes out, they're only there for about 15 minutes. They're essentially, the process is longer behind the scenes. They submit that report back to that AMC company. That AMC company then reviews it, make sure it meets all the, regulations. It's, done appropriately. Then they send it to the lender and say, yep, everything's good on this. Here you go. And then we finally hear about it after the lender gets it. So it's kind of a few days, right, after they went through the property before we find out what it actually appraised for. That appraiser's job pretty much is only to say, K lender, is the purchase price within fair market value? So they do put a value on there, but you shouldn't be surprised if it always is almost identical to what the purchase price is. And so they're just saying, yep, it's within fair market value, or it's not. So I've had people say, well, your comps came in way higher, but the appraisal came in at this. Well, their duty is only to tell the lender pretty much yes or no on whether or not it comes in at value, and that you're not overpaying for the home. And so with that being said, if it doesn't come in any higher, or even if it does come in higher, we don't tell the sellers that. We just say, yep, we're fine on value. We keep it short and sweet. We're not going to tell them, oh yeah, it came in 5,000 more, 10,000 more, because then that seller is going to, potentially, not to say they can, but potentially that could lead to, right, them not working with you on repairs or other things. So we just pretty much say, we're fine on value. But if it comes in low, if you have the financing appraisal contingency and condition, then it gives us the opportunity to negotiate lower on the purchase price. Again, the seller doesn't have to, and you could potentially make up the difference because you still love the home and you don't want it to not go through, which, by the way, that money doesn't count towards your down payment. That's just you making up the appraisal gap, is what we call it. And so once the appraisal's done, it's in, we've gone through that third time negotiating if need be, then the lender is going to finalize your loan. And just so you know, in today's day and age, after 2008, right, the lending process looks completely different for the better. It's actually really good. They're making sure people really can qualify and afford their monthly payments, which is awesome. But with that being said, you as a buyer, you're going to have a lot of paperwork from us to purchase the home. You're going to have a lot of paperwork from the lender that you're submitting to them so they can review it to make sure you can afford it. Give the lender some grace, because really at the end of the day, I say it's like peeling back and layers of an onion. You submit your first initial docs to get pre-qualified, you go under contract, they're probably going to need updated pay stubs and financial statements. And as you submit those documents, they may find something else that they say, oh, do you know what? We actually need a copy of this because we didn't know you had that. So they're kind of going to keep nitpicking you a little bit when it comes to paperwork. But guess what? If you were going to loan out your money to somebody and hope over the next 30 years they're going to keep paying you, you would do it too. So just give them grace and give them whatever they need as soon as possible and work with them, because at the end of the day, it's not any easier for them either, even doing the job. And so, oh, I hit the wrong button. Let's go forward. So once we get through the financing, your lender will send you a closing disclosure to review 3 days prior to closing. So you have to review that. In fact, they have to verify that you reviewed it. And then we get to the closing table. And that is when we do schedule settlement and closing. So those words are used interchangeably, but technically they mean two different things. And so, like I said, settlement is when you actually sign out the closing table, and closing is when it actually funds and records. And so before we go to settlement, we like to do a final walkthrough. And that's just to make sure that during our under contract process, that there's no new damage to the property besides normal wear and tear, that anything that we ask for to be included is still remaining, and your repairs that we ask for are actually completed before we sign out the closing table. It's about 15 minutes is all again, and we head straight to the title company before we make it officially yours. We sign the paperwork there at the title company. If you are out of state or you're not available to come in, they can sometimes do a mobile notary or a mail out closing. And so just, again, there's options with this, right? And it typically takes about 30 minutes up to an hour, but I would say most of our buyers end up having this all the way done, the whole packet signed. It's a pretty thick stack, but most of them are boilerplate and they're redundant. So the three things that you're going to want to look at is your closing disclosure and settlement statement. Again, just going through the figures, making sure all the numbers and all of that equal out. You're going to obviously make sure that your loan amount's correct, your mortgage rate is correct, your monthly payment is what you talked about, and essentially the deed has your correct spelling on it, because that's what the ownership information. And then once all the paperwork's signed, you submit, you wire your funds to the title company. By the way, they will give you wire instructions in person. So don't fall trap to wire fraud. Make sure that you're verifying that and you get that in person. Once everything's done and the lender's funded the file because they've reviewed all the paperwork, funding occurs, then they go ahead, the title company will record the deed at the county. And that's when obviously you become an official homeowner, which is so exciting. That's obviously, this process, it sounds simple and it really is. We take it step by step, but it adds up and it's still emotional and draining and, it's a process. And so once you're a homeowner, the last and final thing is to transfer your utilities. You get to get keys to your home and you get to move in. So once you're all settled in and it finally starts feeling like home, that obviously makes the whole process so worth it and is so exciting. And then here is 7 ways to mess it up. So these are things that have legitimately happened to us that we were like, we need to tell people about this so they know to avoid it. Please don't switch or quit jobs without talking to your lender first. Sometimes if you switch jobs, but it's in the same industry and you have an offer letter or you already have a pay stub and it's a W-2, sometimes it's okay. But again, make sure you're talking to your lender and being full disclosure with them. Don't call in sick a ton and have a bunch of unpaid time off. Another thing too is that reduction in pay. Some people will tell the lender, oh yeah, I work full-time, I work 40 hours a week. They're running your numbers based off of that. If truly at the end of the year, you're really only averaging 35 hours a week, it might not sound like that big of a deal, but 5 hours a week times 52 weeks times whatever you make per hour, that's actually substantially different in the numbers that they're running. And so just make sure that you're very accurate in the information you're providing. Don't have any late payments on anything, especially ones that report to the credit bureau, because if you're already late, they're going to wonder how you are financially and how, in the world you're going to afford a mortgage payment that ends up being typically your biggest payment out of most of your financial obligations. Don't go apply for any new credit cards. If you are, make sure that you're talking to your lender. Sometimes they actually need to establish more credit to get you pre-qualified. So they'll tell you to go get a credit card, and they'll tell you for what limit and how to use it and all of that, because essentially they're the experts. Don't go get any new loans, whether it's a personal loan, if you're refinancing, a line of credit. Again, that's looking like more credit, potentially more debt. And don't go charge on any existing credit cards or limits. Don't go max them out. Don't go to RC Willey's or Home Depot. Try to keep things as similar as possible as when you went and essentially applied for your loan to begin with. And again, if you are going to do any of these things, talk to your lender and make sure. And that includes also, don't go buy a new car. Like sometimes people are like, oh my gosh, I want new, I'm ready for a whole new life. I want a new house. I want new furniture. I want a new car, right? They go on this huge shopping spree and then all of a sudden they can't qualify for the home. It's like, hey, wait till your home has funded and recorded and then go do those things that you're planning to do. And then don't make big, large deposits in your bank account from something other than your employment. Again, mattress money, because they do have to verify where your down payment's coming from. If all of a sudden you have a big, large deposit and you can't say where it came from, that's some red flags to the lender as far as where did you get that money. And outside of that, we typically have questions and answers. So if any of you do have questions, feel free to reach out to our team. We are here to give you the answers that you need, make sure that you have all of the knowledge and you're prepared to take that first step and every step thereafter. We actually have a great home buying timeline that we can email you as well if you want a copy of that. It's really great, just a one pager, and it just has a little pinwheel and it says step-by-step 1 through I think 13. So that way you can kind of see what's in the process. Oh, yep, done that, done that, done that. Here's what's coming up next. Done that. Oh, here's what's coming up next. Just again, try to make this as simple and easy for you and as smooth as transaction as possible. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to the team. Jessica, myself, and Darby truly look forward to working with you. We're full-time, we're experienced, we work together as a team, we have systems, we love to communicate, and we are truly here to add value to your experience and make sure it is a great one that you can rave about after. So feel free to reach out to us, but thanks again for joining us for this webinar. I'm surprised we're 55 minutes in, and that's what I was promising. So we will talk to you soon. Thank you.